Hello, I'm Murray Dale. My background is in television journalism, and one of the subjects I've always enjoyed writing about is the oil and gas industry. The Alberta Energy and Utilities Board has commissioned me to tell the story of Peace River Oil Company No. 1, which is probably the most fascinating oil patch story I have ever come across. This is a short documentary about what really happened along the banks of the Peace River starting almost 100 years ago. The still of the morning of April 15th, 1916, was broken by a strange sound echoing up and down the Peace River, 20 kilometers downstream of the town. Dave Agnew, a senior technologist with the Alberta Energy and Utilities Board, is sure that if you had been on the river that morning, you would have seen and heard a rig making hole. That was Peace River Oil Company No. 1.
You'd see a wooden derrick with a walking beam type of, like a pump jack, this sort of thing. That was the cable tool drive mechanism. There's no rotary table. There'd be a boiler to create the steam to run the engine, and it's a steam engine probably. And that would drive the walking beam, and the walking beam would lift the cable up and down, and the tool at the bottom of the cable would pound rock until it was pulverized, and you go in with a baler and dig it out and make more hole that way.
But the well would be troubled. There were problem zones lurking just below the surface that could not be anticipated. Drillers wrestled with numerous kicks as the tool smashed its way into the well. At 345 meters, they hit the DeBolt Formation, encountering a high-pressure saltwater zone. Peace River Oil Company No. 1 and others like it were drilled on the depressed valley floor, and the lack of sufficient hydrostatic pressure in the wellbore resulted in water from the DeBolt Formation flowing uncontrolled to surface and into the Peace River. These well site geologist notes from 1916 say the driller told an official of the federal government that he was obliged to leave the site for a couple of days, and that when he returned, the gushing water had washed out the ground around the rig, causing it to topple over. The company decided it was impossible to bring Peace River Oil Company No. 1 under control, and simply moved on to drill No. 2, No. 3, and No. 4. All of the wells encountered the same zones of high pressure and were left uncompleted, flowing enormous amounts of salt water and natural gas.
The wells were drilled under the jurisdiction of the federal government back in those days. And I think the federal government made an effort to get these companies to do something about it. But because of the enormity of the problem, they just kind of all walked away from it. So those were some of the first orphan wells in the province.
But it was Peace River No. 1 that would enter the history books as the longest-running blowout in the world. The government of Alberta gained control of its natural resources from the federal government in 1930, and by default inherited the Peace River wells, all of which were still flowing salt water and natural gas. Wendell Glazier remembers those days. His parents homesteaded the flats along the river, and he recalls clearing brush by hand and then sitting down by the burning well to have lunch.
We could get warm with fire coming from it, and it was housed in a housing that washed out actually from the salt water, and you just got on the opposite way. The wind was blowing, and then there was no fumes to bother you, but it was nice and warm in there, especially on cold days.
In 1955, the Petroleum and Natural Gas Conservation Board undertook a program to cap and properly abandon the wells, including Peace River Oil Company No. 1. The board attacked with all of the technology and resources that were available at the time and successfully brought the wells under control. However, years later, EUB well control advisor Bob Grace of Amarillo, Texas, concluded the 1955 relief well was not in communication with the 1916 well through the DeBolt Formation, and therefore the kill was made somewhere up the hole, not at the very bottom of the 1955 relief well, as would have been preferred.
This led to the well kicking at them while they were running cement plugs in it. They moved over from the relief well after they killed the 1916 well, moved over to the 1916 well, ran in and started running cement plugs. Some of those cement plugs weren't effective and didn't set up. So the only plug that we found that was effective was from 70 meters up. So that pressure from the DeBolt flowed up the 1916 well to 70 meters. That pressure created a hydraulic fracturing across to the 1955 well and eventually broke out its surface.
In 1982, the war between the Energy Resources Conservation Board and Peace River Oil Company No. 1 resumed. Crews started drilling a second relief well, which reached only 99 meters before the flow from the well was so great, the third control effort in 66 years was abandoned. Peace River Oil Company No. 1, or Old Salty, as it was becoming affectionately known to area residents, would have its own way for another 20 years. This was the scene on the edge of the Peace River during the final decades of the 20th century. A controlled flare burning off 500,000 cubic feet of slightly sour gas each day, and beneath it, a pipe pouring 30,000 barrels of salt water into the Peace River every day. The Alberta government continually monitored the situation during those years and concluded that the large volumes of river water diluted the escaping flow to the extent that there was virtually no environmental damage. But the language used in documents issued by the federal government shows they viewed the situation much differently. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans concluded that Alberta was allowing the flow of a deleterious substance to enter a fish-bearing stream, and on October 23, 2001, issued a directive to the Alberta Energy and Utilities Board to stop the flow. The federal directive gave the EUB 2 months to remedy the situation. The document pointed out the law provides for a $200,000 fine for each day the flow into the river was allowed to continue. Neil McCrank is the chairman of the Alberta Energy and Utilities Board.
And we, as a responsible organization, felt that we should respond to the direction that they gave us. And we recognize that any amount of salt water being put in any body of water, regardless of how much there is dilution, there is potential environmental damage, so we responded accordingly.
The response was massive. The Alberta Energy and Utilities Board pulled out all the stops in a monumental effort to bring this wild well under control. The EUB managed the program, the petroleum industry paid the bulk of the cost, and the federal government, despite having issued the original drilling license for Peace River Oil Company No. 1, paid nothing.
It did amount to a cost to industry because it was paid for basically through the Orphan Well Program, which is a unique program to Alberta that is fully funded by our industry. And the cost was something over $5 million, which is not insubstantial. And as I say, given the question of jurisdiction, it might be worthwhile to get a contribution from all parties that were responsible.
Traditional well control programs focus on the drilling of a relief well, and if it were not for 2 earlier failed attempts to bring Peace River Oil Company No. 1 under control, this would likely have been the chosen course of action again. But without vital geological and pressure information, the EUB was reluctant to drill another relief well, fearing that another blowout would make matters even worse.
There's no logs for a substantial distance around this well, and there was also The only real geological data was the 1916 geologist notes, which ultimately ended up being very accurate. And the comments from our geologist on site were that considering the limited information this fellow had to deal with at the time, he did a very good job.
The EUB, with agreement from an industry peer review group, opted to drill a stratigraphic test well from a location above the valley floor. Included in the valuable data gained from the strat well was a measurement of the static downhole pressure in the DeBolt Formation. This was a key element in designing the well kill model. Another was the data gathered that allowed the well control team to establish with accuracy the flow path of the salt water and the gas. Up the 1916 well bore to about 70 meters, where it encountered a cement plug from an earlier control attempt, through fractures to the 1955 and 1982 well bores, and then to surface. Instead of drilling another relief well, a plan emerged to re-enter the original 1916 well and set up for a dynamic kill.
The key to our solution was our recommendation to go back into the original 1916 well and get to bottom in that well. And that was the key reason that the previous two attempts did fail. Was we got to bottom where we could dynamically kill the saltwater flow.
The next order of business was to find the original 1916 well. A magnetometer survey produced limited results, and the hunt reverted to old-fashioned digging.
In the fall of 2002, we'd actually needed to find the well because it had been abandoned and covered over, and we didn't know where the well was. So in the fall, we found it, in fact found that casing stub 6.5 meters down. We tied that back to surface in preparation for the re-entry work in 2003.
Preparations for the kill attempt resumed early in the spring. First, tons of concrete that had been poured around the 1955 wellhead to stabilize the rig when water blew out around the casing in 1982 had to be removed. Then, a huge flow line that had been attached to the wellhead to divert the flow of water also had to be removed without shutting in the well. The cap on the 1955 well then had to be removed with great care. There was no certainty about the amount of water or poisonous H2S that might come blowing out of the casing as it was loosened. Safety professionals masked up and stood by while a highly specialized crew cut the bolts from the cap with a stream of water and abrasives delivered at 36,000 psi. The old casing spool was replaced by a new wellhead with valves, BOPs, and all the other equipment necessary for re-entry. July 16th, 2003. It is the day before the kill. 87 years and 3 months since drilling started on Peace River Oil Company No. 1. The lease and the road are covered with wooden matting to give the heavy equipment and nearly 100 people involved in the control effort a firm footing. Crews on the service rig set up on the 1916 wellbore are making final preparations for the kill. Powerful pumping units will force heavy mud and cement down the well at pressures designed to overwhelm the surging salt water. Bob Grace, the Texas well kill specialist, takes a final tour of the rig to inspect the equipment, looking for any last-minute glitches.
Well, we have to deliver about 20 barrels a minute from the mud tanks over there into the well, and that should kill the well. And so if we do that, I think the well's killed. Then we have to go turn around and put cement behind it. We have to put about 500 to 800 barrels of cement behind our kill mud. We'll pump 1,000 barrels of kill mud, and then about 800 barrels of cement, and that cement has to go down there then and set up very shortly after it gets on bottom to keep the well killed after we kill it.
The kill mud was hauled to the site in thousands of bags that needed to be individually opened and mixed with water. The kill mud is composed of barite, a naturally occurring mineral that is mixed with water to produce a fluid of sufficient density to control the downhole pressure.
We're sitting about 2,280 right now, so we're sitting pretty much even. Once it mixes in with the other two tanks, we'll be pretty much right on 2,300. So when you go down the hole?
2,280 kilograms per cubic meter. That's the mud weight.
The weight might be right, but is there enough mud in the tanks to do the job? That's the $64,000 question. The fact is, there is so much equipment and supplies on site, it looks like an oil show. There were 8 pre-mixing tanks for the mud and 14 water tanks in which to store the mud before it's pumped. The kill program was modeled by Bob Grace, who calculated the amount of mud and cement that he believed would be required, and then he doubled it. Chris Bellis of Frontier Engineering says it will be several minutes into the operation before they know if the well can be killed.
I think halfway into the job, or sooner, we won't be seeing any more water come to surface. At that point, we'll know we're in pretty good shape to finish the job by pumping the rest of the kill mud, and then by following it with this fairly fast-setting cement. Ultimately, we won't know that we've killed the well for probably 4 to 6 hours after we stop pumping, because there's always the potential for the well to start flowing back before the cement gets hard.
Most crew members return to Peace River for a good night's sleep. Prerequisites for the kill were a ready crew and good weather. But there were some ominous signs. Each day on site begins with a safety meeting. With a crew this large, it's a serious matter.
All the equipment and manpower moving around, there's a lot of safety risk, added safety risk to the movement of equipment and hammering lines, of course.
Poisonous sour gas and extremely high pressures are also high on the list of safety concerns.
I don't want anybody up on the rig floor except me or Chris that wants to start pumping. There's no reason to go up there. Too much stuff up there, too much iron to be banging around, so screw it. Don't get yourselves hurt. We just always start over again.
There's excitement in the air. After years of planning the ultimate kill of the oldest blowout in the history of oil and gas production, the moment of truth has arrived.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's had its own way for 86 years, and we're going to give it the shock of its life here in a few minutes. It's just been sitting down here doing whatever it wanted to do for a long, long time.
The enormous volumes of kill mud and cement will be pumped under extremely high pressure. That calls for some careful testing.
1.016 on the pump rate, 1.038 on the mash rate. Looks good here. Right with you. You can shut that one off. Let's try that very first pumper again, please.
Bill Terrell will monitor mud returns to the surface and radio data back to Chris Bellis and EUB officials in the control van.
I won't know whether it's weighted up or not weighted up.
Yeah, I know it's 8.65.
Okay. Okay, let's go down and get set up on it, and
we'll just move the pickup and put it on back.
yeah, just go down the back. You can drive. There's a vacuum truck sitting there.
On the bucket? Truck shut down. Going online there, Jerry.
All the equipment is tested and ready. A cold front moves through with gusty winds, but it's not enough to delay the kill. The powerful diesel engines on the pumps rev up in unison, and the ground around Peace River Oil Company number 1 starts to rumble. Huge volumes of heavy kill mud are now being pumped downhole, and not surprisingly, the decision is made to increase the pressure.
This well was not going to go down without a fight. Generally, a well where you're pumping at 4 cubes a minute, you would typically get ahead of that well and be able to control that flow. When we were pumping at 4 cubes, we were just pumping, and that barite was being basically washed away. We upped it to 5 cubes a minute and started to see a little bit of improvement. We were starting to get ahead of it.
I just seen some zero numbers right there. 0.1, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7. Back up to 3 again.
We then again updated the pump pressure to 6 cubes a minute. And at that point, we started to get a feel that we were going to be able to control the well. But like I say, we were pumping away for 20 or 30 minutes without seeing a real any signs that the well was going to give up.
We're showing space zeros here, Chris, gas and fluid. How long's that been, Bill? Probably the count of 30. Half a minute, eh? Yeah, or better.
The weight of the kill mud has overwhelmed the pressure of the gas and water. There's one final move to make sure it's permanent. This is Chris Bellis on the radio.
Okay, Bill, we're all done with the kill mud. We're just flipping over to cement now.
The crew collectively crossed its fingers, hoping the special cement mix will set up before the well starts flowing again.
Well, it went a little tougher than we thought it would, frankly, but it was well within our box that we had calculated, but we were hoping it would kill a little quicker than it did, but it killed within what we'd anticipated. So we're pretty pleased right now. If our cement will just set up, if it'll stay like this, stay dead for an hour or so, we got it.
It is set already.
Give it about an hour, and I think we got it. Okay, good deal.
You sure look good though, didn't it?
Yeah.
Right on the 1,000 barrels that just quit.
Yeah.
Good numbers.
Success is closer at hand with each passing minute, and everyone involved in the massive effort to bring the wild wells under control starts to breathe easier. The evidence was here. No sign of the salt water that had been flowing into the Peace River, and no more sour gas being flared off.
It wasn't as easy as we expected. It's always a matter of finding out what you got down hole, and you never know all the data what's down hole. So you plan for the extremes, and we had enough. That's the key.
With the battle won, the site of Peace River Oil Company No. 1 is returning to normal. The wells have been cut and capped beneath the surface and the lease area reclaimed. The kill brings to an end a long and fascinating chapter in the history of the Peace River country, and most people, including Wendell Glazier, are pleased the Alberta Energy and Utilities Board and the oil and gas industry of Alberta have fixed a long-standing environmental problem.
Actually, it's the best for our environment, and really a good job done, I would say.